Hello, hello, and welcome to Motivation and Money with me, Mark Terrell, and my co-host Fanny Snaith. How are you today, Fanny?
Excellent as usual, thank you.
Fabulous to hear. Good stuff. So today we're talking about money as a motivator, the pros and cons. Perfect topic for the both of us. No, seeing that I talk about motivation and help my clients with what motivation is and what their teams come to work for. And obviously, Fanny, what do you do?
I help people with the balance of time, energy, and money.
Right.
Right.
Perfect. So,
Both on a
so
mindset, practical level, on every
what
level. So, yeah.
I think in many ways, sort of money is taken for granted as a motivator. So, give people more money and everything will be better. But in my experience, and probably in yours, we know it's not that simple. And sometimes it can actually have the opposite effect by giving, especially when you give a blanket increase in pay, particularly when that obviously then people think, well, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you just get a percentage increase and that's it. So nothing's taken into account with regard to performance. Um, so that's the first thing to say about the money thing, as far as I'm concerned. If you treat money as just something that everyone appreciates in the same way, that's a mistake. I think there are people that are motivated by money. I've come across many that have clearly shown a clear drive for wealth or money to accumulate money, but there's always a story behind it as to why that is the case. And we can talk about the towards and away from situations as well. I think that would be an interesting scenario. So that's my sort of opener, really, is that first of all, we've got to think about, yes, we need money. And most people want to go to work and feel that they are being fairly rewarded for their endeavours. And there are other people, or some people, that actually go to work to create as much wealth as possible because that's something that drives them. There's no right or wrong about that, but that is my experience. Does that sort of correlate with what you
It
come
does.
across?
I think it's important to think about the different levels that we've got. I mean, number one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Hmm.
money these days should be on it, right? Because it's the same as having food and to give us what we need. So
Yeah.
the motivation to actually go out and earn money is literally to satisfy our basic needs.
Hmm.
Then you move into the next thing. It's like, what keeps you engaged? What makes you want to grow? Do you then, are your goals money related, or are they just get through life? I mean, where do you go from that? And I mean, I know from my own experience, and I have to say, I think the towards and the away from motivation is really, really important.
Hmm.
As somebody who grew well, built wealth from an away from motivation, and because I didn't want to be broke,
Hmm.
uh, and the fear of losing money, etc. That's a quite a miserable road to go down. But I think also then if you go, you can have another road where you're going towards motivation. I want to have a new car. I want to have a bigger house. I want to have that, where you get
Hmm.
into what we call wage creep,
Hmm.
where actually all you do is you end up working really, really hard for a really, 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 really long time. You then retire at some ridiculous age and go and sit around doing whatever you want to do while you're retired. And I think that I don't know whether again, the questions that you ask, but there's a part of it in the middle, isn't it? Is that you can be motivated by money to create a lifestyle for yourself which is financially sustainable,
Hmm.
whereby if you work really hard quite early on to secure the people who are in fire, right? Financially independent, retire early people, the
Hmm.
fire people. If you work really, really hard and you're motivated totally by getting the money, which in turn buys you time
Hmm.
because it's self-fulfilling. It just, the wheels keep turning, and yet you can sit on a beach. Interestingly, for those kind of people, I should imagine, and I haven't seen the research on this, but I should imagine that quite a few of those people aren't able to sit down and do nothing, but not stop being
Yeah.
entrepreneurial or
Oh, well, do they
having put
actually do? What do they actually really want to do? Nothing, because everybody sort of
well
works
exactly
towards this retirement dream, but then when retirement turns up, they suddenly realise actually it's not
yeah
quite what I was expecting, and it's not quite so fulfilling, and I need to
yeah.
do something about this.
But
Yeah.
looking at incentives or money as an incentive,
Hmm.
as a motivator, as an incentive, is
Yeah.
incentive the same as motivator for you?
So the way I would talk about it is that all all drives or motivations are internal, so everything comes from within. So if you're driven by money, then it becomes
Intrinsic,
something
yeah.
that comes as an intrinsic, as opposed to some people might say money is extrinsic.
Ah,
But actually, if you are naturally just driven by money for whatever reason, then
yep.
then it's intrinsic. It's driving you to do something, because understanding motivation is a what do they call it?
So we're talking
There's
about
a word for
value.
it. Well, motivation is a fusion of two words: motive and action. Motive
Motivate.
being the reason, action being the thing we do because of it. So we always bear that in mind. Motivation is a reason to do something.
Is that
What
a
is?
value? Is that the same as a value?
I think. Well, it's very closely linked to it. I think if people go to work and feel that, and I talk a lot about the feelings we have from our work. If you
Yeah,
want to go to work and feel that you are being well paid, and that allows you to have the lifestyle that you want, that's going to ultimately make you feel good. You're going to perform better. But if that isn't important to you, if money isn't particularly important to you, if someone gives you more money, that's not going to make any difference whatsoever. Because, well, it might have a little bit of difference if you've got a drive for security, and that's the other sort of drive I think that is linked to money. Because if you have more money, in most cases, it will give you more security, because that allows us. So, an interesting story that I had: one of my very early clients that used motivational maps at the time. Um, I was working with the business owner and the team, and when I was talking to the team, they were talking about the business owners being money obsessed. He didn't ever talk about pretty much anything else apart from money. But when I talked to the business owner, it wasn't about having money for the sake of having money. His drive was that he wanted to make sure that he had enough money in the bank account to always be able to pay his bills. And he paid me literally the day after I put my bill in, which is, again, an interesting scenario, which we haven't got time to go into. But that was his idea around money, that he didn't like owing it. And also, he didn't like people owing him money. But what happened was that it turned out he talked a lot about money, which made his team think that he's obsessed by money. But he actually wasn't particularly. It wasn't about being wealthy. It was about just having enough to pay his bills. So,
it's interesting, isn't it? So,
mm.
okay. So going back to, I was looking at some Harvard research,
Oh,
actually.
that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it was talking about how if incentives created or money incentives or any what incentives created employee engagement.
Hmm.
And engagement is important, but sustainability, I think, is that what they call it? Yeah, people. What do you call it? Is that what it's called when people stay at work? Sustainability, when people actually remain in their jobs.
Uh,
Because that's the
Retention, engagement. Yeah,
that's the problem that we've got in the UK at the moment, isn't it? That we've
yeah,
got trying to get people to stay. People are leaving the workforce in droves. I
yeah.
was reading about it in the Guardian today. Actually, it's quite an interesting article.
Hmm.
But so apparently, there's no correlation as to how much you're paid, or paid as to how engaged you are in your work, which I was quite um,
Hmm.
surprised that you can be engaged or disengaged wherever you are.
Yeah,
So you can never, it says here, employers can never create engagement by paying people more. However, they can destroy or disable engagement in the blink of an eye using pay, which I thought was
yeah.
quite interesting.
Which is, I guess, it's to do with what I've just spoke about when you give blanket increases, and so when you give a blanket increase of a percentage, then that doesn't actually make anybody feel particularly good. They're just saying, well, here we are, there's an increase, that should sort you out, sort of things, and it's not really very targeted.
No.
Um, but I think it's interesting talking about to bring in what's happening at the moment within particularly the public sector with the strikes that are happening.
I was going to mention that. It's really interesting, isn't
Because
it?
when we come to talk about money, obviously at the moment it's top of their it's in their it's an important factor because they see their wages being eroded by inflation, and so it's a hot topic, and they have to. Although yes, particularly in the NHS, I wouldn't have thought most of them are driven by money. In
No.
most cases, the majority there obviously will be some, but majority won't be part of the NHS because it's driven by money. But there comes a time when money becomes a hygiene factor.
Exactly. The
So
hygiene.
hygiene factors are important here when we think, well, we don't go to work for it, but when it becomes something that's lacking
Yeah.
or not really meeting our expectations, it then
Yeah.
becomes a problem that we need to and want to are driven or motivated to do something about. It's more about the fulfillment of it actually rather than the actual drive that keeps you going.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So, what are people motivated by then if they're not motivated by money? Pension, that's money, but it's long-term
more
pension.
security, isn't it? A pension. Yeah, obviously there's the money attached to it, but I think when someone has a pension, it gives them security, knowing that they have something in the future that's going to, sustain
Yeah.
them financially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I would see it anyway. More of a security-driven
Yeah.
motivator.
Because the thing is that if you're so therefore this is where we have to strike the balance, right? My top value, which is working on finding balance,
Mm-hmm.
is to be paid enough money that it can comfortably pay your bills and give you a certain lifestyle, which is
Mm-hmm.
obviously going to be different for different people, whilst getting up, getting out of bed in the morning and feeling motivated and valued, and that you have relationships and that there's leadership and teammanship and all that kind of stuff when you go to work, and that the work that you do has a purpose.
Yeah. Belonging. Yeah, as you mentioned, being part of a team is a strong
Yeah.
motivator for some.
But also going to do a job that you believe is
Makes a difference. Yeah.
worth makes a difference. That's the
Yeah.
word I'm talking about.
And that is the drive in most cases that keeps people in their
Keep people going.
positions long term, feeling that what they do, is worthwhile and makes a difference. That's the thing that is most powerful when those things, like when you have enough money and you have security and you feel that those things are almost taken for granted, then the purpose thing is almost something that drives you on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that you understand what it is that you do that makes a difference. So again, another story that I had quite some time ago, actually, I did some work with a junior lawyer. She did some conveyancing work, and she was very demotivated. And what we found out was that she was very much motivated by purpose, and she'd basically she was disconnected to the outcome that she was helping to come about. So she didn't see that she was helping people to buy their next dream home. It was just she was just a cog in the wheel that just or the cog in the machine, I should say, that I just do something and it sort of allows something to happen, but I'm not really connected. So I said to her that what you need to do is actually connect to the outcome and look do you get feedback? She said, oh yeah, I get plenty of feedback. So once she reconnected with that feedback, she then pulled out the words that we've been used about the way she did things, and it was all about, well, she made things easy, she was reliable, and all those sort of things. So she suddenly realised, actually, there's something in this, and what I need to do is think about what it is that I want to feel about my work. And then she made the decision that she was in a law firm that was probably not the type that she wanted to be in. It was too big.
Right.
And so she made the decision to move into and find a smaller law firm that she would feel more connected to the outcome, and that's basically what she did. So talk about things that drive people's actions. When you're not feeling something, then the thing to do is, well, how can I change what's happening that will make me feel that I am getting fulfilled from my work? And some things are subtle, some things are fairly drastic, I suppose, from what I described in the changing jobs and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's what happens all the time now. I mean, especially the younger generations will jack in their jobs, even though they need the money, if they feel that their job's taking them nowhere and they're not fulfilled. And it's not something I would ever consider at their age, but
Back
it's a
then,
different generation. Back in
well, but then,
the day,
yeah, but then on the other hand, if they're not on the housing ladder,
yeah,
so they haven't got, they're living at home, or they've, haven't got the kind of overheads that we had maybe at that time, those responsibilities, because not through no choice of their own, but because they can't afford to get them.
hmm
It's easier to just jack something in, isn't it?
yeah. I suppose that you could say, well, you can make a judgment on it, but I see that sort of generations, and I'm talking about the 20 to 30s, have a different set of considerations when it comes to work, whether you want to call them values or what it is. It's things that they take into account, that if they're not feeling it,
Yeah.
then they take action. Whereas I
Whereas we
probably
sat there
wouldn't
for
have,
years.
to be honest. I would be of, oh, well, I'm lucky to have a job, and I should knuckle down and make the most of it, sort of thing. I suppose that was the
Yeah.
mentality then. But things change, and with when you say about not having the responsibilities, a lot of that generation don't see themselves ever being able to own a house.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
It was interesting. I read another bit about incentives, because and they did say incentives is different than motivation, which I get that. When I remember I came back from Australia back in 1991, a long time ago, I got a job with a incentive company called Motive Force, and we would do those things whereby we would create company incentive schemes. So, for instance, I know one we did was Unipart. Does Unipart still exist? I don't think it does it?
It does, but it's named. It's got changed its name. I
Did
can't
it?
think of what it is at
So
the moment.
we had to do this thing where we did a countrywide karting competition,
hmm
where so it was all linked with sales figures and all this kind of stuff. And so we organised this incentive program whereby there would be a inter-Unipart competition of go-karting. So they'd be shipped around the country, and the winners went to the Grand Prix in Monaco, which was really rather nice.
Well,
And
yeah.
actually, looking at those kind of incentives, apparently, that what was really interesting is that they are good and they work really well. But you've got to look at the word work. What does work mean?
hmm
And they only give temporary results, which is the first thing. And secondly, they motivate or focus the workforce on the particular goal, which means that on that sort of very limited funnel, this is what we've got to achieve, which then means that other things around it might not go as strongly as it was before, to
hmm
the expense of other things, which I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it was a big thing, wasn't it? We used to have green shield stamps, and we used
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have, all these kind of little incentive schemes. I did another one for a huge insurance company where it was all to do with gambling chips and poker, and you played this game, and you go and sell a couple of X number of insurance policies, and
hmm
you got X number of points that you could cash in for a barbecue fork or something like that.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But it went into a bid competition whereby again we'd send people to that. We send a couple of people to Las Vegas, etc.
hmm
So it's interesting, isn't it? What we will do to
It,
get.
it, it is. Human behaviour is fascinating. Just Unipart do still exist, and they're basically a logistics company, still into manufacturing, automotive, and
Right,
stuff.
because they used to be
Um,
quite big, didn't they?
yeah, but
Yeah,
I think the interesting thing about incentives. Well, we back in the retail days, we had a loyalty card where people collect points and then can spend them on goods and all that sort of stuff. But actually, looking back, the most valuable part of that is the data you collect on the person, so that you can then keep in touch with them when they're not in the store and that's why if you see today, there's a lot
Mm.
of going on. I don't know if you noticed, like I've noticed that there's been a big change in there's a Waitrose up the road, and they now are doing specific offers, people only for people that have got the card, club card, Tesco's club
Yeah,
card has changed,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that there are lots of
Data's
offers that
a big
are only applicable if you use your card, whereas it used to be just a points system. So these things, making people or changing behaviours is what they're trying to do. So they visit the store more often and get more connected to the benefits of having that card. I think
whilst they're
that's what's going
collecting
on.
data.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Data is obviously very
data is
important.
the huge currency, right? Data's the currency of the 21st century, really.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, it is interesting. It's like, I don't. What are you motivated by most at work then? When if you do we talk about what about in self-employment? How do we make that work?
Well, it's interesting with the work I do, and I work with business owners and identifying their motivators. Build the builder motivator, which is the how we describe the drive for motivation within the motivational maps framework, is rarely in the top three, because most people have left employment to set up a business, and it's not about making more money. It tends to be about having more purpose, having more freedom, being more of an expert, and having control on for what you do, as opposed to having to go and work for somebody else and doing things their own way. So, but and a big but is that when I do come across an entrepreneur, we'll call them, and they do have a strong builder driver, money drive, then they are without exception more successful financially, without a doubt. So it brings home all the time to me that if you focus on something, then you're more likely to get it. So the scenario tends to be in most cases that there's not enough focus on money, and so it's not there's not enough action taken around it. So when we know that a business is reliant on money, so it has to be financially stable, and we can have as much freedom on purpose and all that sort of stuff. But if you're not getting enough revenue in to pay your bills, then you're not going to stick around for very long. So it becomes that again the hygiene factor thing, where if you're not getting enough of it, then it's going to cause you a problem. So sometimes it's about just looking at what you do, how you charge. So I was having a conversation with a client not so long ago, and asked the question. I asked it because I knew the builder driver was low. How recently did you review your prices? And it went a bit quiet for a while. I think it was a couple of years ago or something like that. And I said, look, I just think that you need to be more aware of the fact that money is not your driver, but you need to take some action around money. So that means you need to keep your prices in line with inflation, at least keep them moving forward and review them every year, even if it doesn't feel right, because ultimately, if you're not doing that, then inflation is going to catch up with you. But bearing in mind also that you're doing more work, you'll become more of an expert, and they were an expert-driven person. When you become more of an expert, you can charge more. So always remember that with experience becomes more expertise, and you're more valuable. So you
Yeah,
should base your prices on that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then therefore we just get come back round again
Mm-hmm.
to people's relationship with money,
Mm-hmm.
because the reason that they're not raising their prices is because they don't want to look at it, or they have looked at it and they feel that they can't for whatever reason, which that takes you down another pathway
Mm-hmm.
of why don't you think you can, or I don't look at the money side. It's again, isn't it, it's that relationship with money that's so important. And
Yeah.
this is why I think it's so fascinating, the difference now between that I obviously notice now that I'm self-employed, the difference between being employed and how it affects so much compared to being self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to work every month, every week, every day, and then that money lands in your bank account at the end of each month, where you sort of get given a little piece of paper that goes with it, either in a sealed envelope or
Mm-hmm.
by email,
Yeah.
which nobody talks about. Nobody, people hardly look at. A lot of people don't even look at them.
Mm.
And yet when you're self-employed, every single penny that you get in is like a yes. It's sort of, look, just
Yeah.
creating that flow.
Yeah, and it was interesting. We
So,
were both on a call yesterday
yeah.
with it was a small business minister, as you and talking
Mm,
about the importance of every penny to a small business, whereas the large
yes.
business can't have no relationship just because it's a few £100s. They actually
Yes.
pay them later, thinking, "Oh, that doesn't matter." But actually, those small amounts that they pay to small suppliers matter more than the thousands that they might be paying to a large company.
Of course, of course. And
Mm.
again, it comes down to motivation. We can put it
Mm.
down to this as well.
Yeah.
Is that if I have a lovely lady working for me called Alice, and when her invoice comes in, the minute I see it, I pay it,
Mm.
because it's that also is going to affect our relationship.
Yeah.
She could put 14 days or 7 days on her invoice, and I could wait for the, 6 day, 23rd hour before pressing that button. But what
Mm.
does it do to your relationship?
Yeah. It's like anything, isn't it? When you're early, it's so much appreciated. It's when you arrive early to anything. It's
Yeah,
amazing how just arriving 5 minutes early can make a massive difference to the person that's always, on, dead on the dot. I know. Have you ever employed anybody? Have you had that
well, only,
responsibility as such? Have you
no,
paid? Have
because
you ever paid payroll? That's the thing.
I used to have 400 on the payroll when I was running the market research telephone room. So I'd have
Yeah. So
45 people in at any one time. People late for work used to do my head in.
yeah, yeah. So you know what it feels like, but the
Yeah,
ones that stand out are the ones that are always there 5 minutes early, and you can
yeah,
rely on them to be there, and they're not walking through the door at the time. I mean, my retail business, you know, drove you mad when they were due in at say 10 o'clock, and they know that they were due on the till, and they actually, if they don't get there, the person that's relieving has to wait until they get there, and they
yeah.
still
Till
walk through the door at
10
dead
o'clock.
on 10 o'clock, and then they have to go to the staff and drop the stuff up. By the time they come back, it's like 3 minutes past, and they do it thinking, but that's, it drives you mad, because you think, well, why couldn't
Do
you have
you
been here like so that you were actually starting work at that time? That's
yeah,
what you should be doing. Not for
actually
me as the
on.
business owner, but the person that you're relieving from what they're doing, because they can't leave until you get there. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
funny though, isn't it? Because all these things, this is sort of a bit of a different conversation. We digress a little
yeah,
bit.
we have.
But do we really have to teach people this stuff? Do we?
We should, we
Maybe.
shouldn't, but by little things make a massive difference, and timing is a thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just doing that little bit extra that isn't you're not told to do. I think if you do things that are, again, going into your own values, doing things that are in line with your values, which then make you stand out.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's a positive. Sometimes your values might actually be causing you a problem. I don't know, but we're not here to talk about values.
Yeah.
But as we're getting towards the end of our sort of 30 minutes, with regards to money as a motivator, my final word on it would
Final
be,
word.
my final word, only because we have to
Um,
sort of wrap up somehow,
yeah.
um,
It better
is
be good.
that money is a driver, but in most cases, it's what people expect to be paid, as long as they're paid and we're talking about people that are paid a wage in this instance. Once they are paid what they feel is a reasonable amount of money, then it becomes not about money. So if you give somebody more money, then it won't be an incentive. Um, in most cases, but we don't want to generalize here. So the thing we need to do, as a motivational practitioner, I have to say it, is that we should first of all understand what drives everyone at work, what makes them feel good, and if giving them more money makes them feel good, then that's what we should try to do. But in most cases, what people do come to work for is always to feel that they make a difference, and that's the key here.
Yeah.
Making your team feel good about their work and tapping into that by unlocking their motivation is what you
Yeah.
should be spending most of your time doing.
Yeah. And my last word would be, I guess, similar to yours in that, but talking on a more individualistic scenario is that if you go to work and money motivates you, great. If it's a motivator, but if it's the motivator that just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, and that you have this constant feeling that there's never enough, never enough, never enough, never enough. I can't remember who said it, but I love this phrase, was that if you are running towards what you think is nirvana, the chances are you're running in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. If it is, it's become almost like an obsession, isn't it? When money is
we're
everything.
talking about extrinsic motivation, whereas we all know that intrinsic motivation comes from within. And if I'm looking at the money types, you're talking tyrant,
Right.
which is, yeah, of course, financially successful looks great, but what you really want is what money can't buy, and
Right,
that's love and
excellent.
friendship and
So
connection.
brilliant. So before we go, don't
Mhm.
forget to visit Fanny's website where you can do the money types quiz, all
Yes,
free, and you'll understand more about what your relationship with money. And that takes, how long does that generally take, Fanny?
5 minutes, no more.
5 minutes. Cool. And I mentioned motivational maps.
Yep.
If you complete a motivational maps, which is included in my How to Stay Energized at Work course, that takes about 10 to 12 minutes. So in
It's really
15, 17 minutes, you can understand what your relationship to money is and understand what motivation is by visiting both our websites, which you'll see in the closing credits after the end of the show, which is coming up very shortly. So would you like to say anything before we go, Fanny?
yes. Goodbye.
So it's goodbye from Fanny and it's goodbye from me, and looking forward to the next time. Have a great day.
Take care.